TradeSquare is Australia's first business-to-business marketplace connecting people, brands and organisations into this diverse ecosystem in a unique global landscape. Through pivoting, transforming and reshaping, Australian businesses have an opportunity to create the model for the future that aligns with the world's needs and leveraging the power of a collaborative approach. Through the TradeSquare podcast, we will bring together dynamic, diverse and thought-provoking leaders from business, government and organisations to have conversations to further enable new thinking for the future. Welcome to TradeSquare, Australia's leading B2B marketplace. I'm Catherine Vandermeulen and joining me today is Kate Healy, Director of PwC's Indigenous Consulting. How are you, Kate?
I'm well, thanks, Kath. How are you?
Good, thank you. So tell us, who is Kate Healy?
Kate Healy wears lots of different hats, but at the moment Kate Healy is a non-Indigenous woman who has the pleasure and I guess the great privilege of being able to work with PwC's Indigenous Consulting, which is an Aboriginal-owned business, the first of its kind to have a joint venture with PwC Australia. And we get to do amazing work in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs space, from economic development through to cultural consulting and cultural safety training through to policy evaluation and design.
And so tell us about your original call to adventure to joining PwC's Indigenous Consulting.
Yeah, I started life as a corporate lawyer. So I went to law school, I did an economics degree, and I was really dead set on making sure that I was having a very corporate career that didn't have to deal with people's lives. And I did do that for about 15 years, working with national law firms in Australia and in New Zealand, and did some great work in the commercial property, banking and finance sort of space. And then woke up one morning and felt that I was lacking a sense of purpose, and was lucky enough at that point to have a conversation with a great mentor who introduced me to an Auckland-based Māori hapu or sub-tribe called Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, who needed somebody with a whole range of skills, some of which I had, some of which I didn't, to take on the role as their chief operating officer and drive a housing project for them primarily, but within 3 months of joining Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, I was able to get involved in a whole bunch of much more community-facing work that's given me a much stronger sense of purpose. So when my family was moving back to Australia in late 2017, early 2018, and I started looking around for things to do, PwC's Indigenous Consulting really pulled at my heartstrings, and I was lucky enough to get a role here.
Very exciting. And so what are the biggest focuses in your role that really support Australian businesses, and particularly around Indigenous businesses?
Yeah, our big focus, I suppose, Kath, is about opportunity and making sure that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned businesses have the opportunity to play in the mainstream and get to work with the large corporates, but also with small customers and other mainstream businesses to really bring their strengths and contribution to the fore. There are some amazing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owned businesses doing really cool, unique stuff that we get to, I guess, shine a spotlight on and make introductions to some of our larger and PwC's larger corporate clients and make those connections.
And so over the last 12 months, how have you really seen businesses evolve and add more value to the world?
I think the last 12 months and really the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a much stronger focus on the idea of creating shared value and corporates and businesses having a social conscience and the social license to operate. And with that increased focus on what does a business do beyond simply making a product or employing a person or selling something, what is their broader contribution to society? And with that increased focus, we've seen businesses step outside their comfort zone and really start to lean in and have an opinion on things like the Uluru Statement of the Heart or on gay marriage rights or on getting to net zero faster. And that social conscience is evolving into creating opportunities for a much more diverse range of people through employment, through social procurement frameworks, through just creating opportunity is the word for me, I think, Kath, is that there's just so many more opportunities out there beyond the traditional employment pathways and business opportunities, I think, that were previously presenting themselves.
Can you explain to us a little bit more about what the term social license to operate means?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most obvious example for me, and the one that comes to mind first, is Rio Tinto and the Juukan Gorge incident that happened last year, in April last year, where Rio, through their regular operations and under something that was perfectly legal in terms of the permits that they had from the state government, blew up the Juukan Gorge caves, and with that destroyed 60,000 years worth of history in that site. So Rio Tinto was allowed to do that, but the reaction from society was so, and particularly Aboriginal people, but broader society has been involved too, is that everybody was screaming, saying, hey, that's not the way you're allowed to behave. Yes, it might be legally okay, but socially we don't accept behaviour like that anymore. And there was boycotting and there was picketing outside annual general meetings. Reconciliation Australia, one of the important bodies within Indigenous affairs in Australia, has kicked Rio Tinto out and sanctioned them. So it's this reaction from the broader society that says you need to operate better, a little bit like the banks faced through the Banking Royal Commission a few years ago as well, this social pressure on our corporates to demonstrate a sense of morals that is attuned, I guess, to the current moral standard, not back in the day where businesses only had to make profit and returns to shareholders. Now broader society feels that corporates owe them something as well, and I think they do.
And so how have you seen resilient, dynamic and resourceful individuals playing a key role in working towards transforming Australian businesses?
I'm so lucky, Kath. I get to see that every day. I think working in PwC, and I'd see 7,000 or 8,000 other people around me doing great work and demonstrating their resilience and resourcefulness. But I also think in the Aboriginal business sector, which is where I work day to day, we see some really amazing individuals who, over the last 12 or 18 months in particular, have been able to pivot and change the way they operate to make sure that they have been responding to the challenges that the globe has been throwing them. I've seen small businesses working from garages, be able to change production lines so that rather than producing alcohol, they're now producing hand sanitizer. I've seen others who are already in the PPE space, so supplying personal protective equipment to businesses, and usually that's quite a sideline gig, see that opportunity open up and be able to tap much larger companies and start establishing their own connections with those companies through the crisis that COVID created. And I just see people being able to bring forward their I guess, cultural knowledge and identity into the workplace and change the way, I guess, mainstream views Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within Australian society and moving towards parity and acceptance, I think, which is, it's disappointing words to have to use, but it's probably accurate.
And so what are some of the key ways for Australian businesses to really actively pursue deeper relationships with Indigenous-owned businesses?
There are quite a few ways Australian businesses can do that, and I guess it depends at what point they are on their cultural safety or cultural awareness journey. And, we have some Australian people and businesses who are just starting that journey, which is long and probably lifelong, frankly, and others who are more advanced. But provided you're creating spaces without racism and spaces that are open and accepting, then employment is a great way to start pursuing deeper relationships with Indigenous people. And then after employment, there's the opportunity, obviously, to be buying more products and services from Indigenous-owned businesses. Supply Nation is a great starting point, I suppose, is a place where own businesses are certified, and there's a degree of safety around working with Supply Nation certified businesses, in that there's an independent checking in terms of ownership of those businesses. But if you go onto a Supply Nation website and have a look at the vast array of businesses they have, if you want a product, you can probably find an Indigenous-owned business that supplies it. And then beyond that, each of the states have their own chambers of commerce that similarly promote and work with Indigenous-owned businesses to work with non-Indigenous-owned businesses to grow the pie for everybody. So there's quite a few ways out there to do it. It's easy enough to find. If you go looking for Aboriginal-owned businesses, you can find them, and I'd be surprised if you wouldn't be able to find a business that can provide you with the skills or services that you need.
And so what's a key message that you are super passionate about, that you are advocating and championing through your work?
Well, you won't be surprised to hear, Kat, that one of my key messages and things that I'm passionate about is greater economic participation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people throughout Australia. So about creating opportunities, about pushing out of your comfort zone to try something new and different, and to not always be stuck doing the same thing. So I'm talking to companies about taking a chance on a new business in a supply chain rather than going to the tried and trusted supplier all the time. Why don't you give this small Aboriginal business a go? Why don't you work alongside them as they grow and scale? Why don't you employ this young Aboriginal person and give them a go? Let's give them a go. And unless we do that, we're not creating those opportunities to make this a much more normal, and I'm using my air inverted commas, a more normal thing. And once we start breaking down those barriers, it becomes a more regular and usual thing, and we get diversity and representativeness within the workplace and within the business community.
And so what are some of the hot topics in your office at PwC at the moment that you are excited about within your department?
So we're excited about National Reconciliation Week, which happens at the end of May. And we're talking about that being more than just a word this year. And the amazing thing for us is it's not just PIC, which is a small business of 50 people that is talking about that, but it's 8,000 people through all of PwC Australia. So reconciliation and taking that from being a word and putting it into action is making us excited. We're also really privileged to be working on a number of economic and employment strategies at the moment for at a state government level, but also at a local government level, that I think the more we start being able to talk about change and really investing in and alongside Aboriginal businesses and people, the better outcomes we're going to get. I think the other thing that we're talking about a lot and continues to be a real challenge for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business owners is access to capital. And at the end of last year, we were able to write alongside with the Minderoo Foundation a great paper that explored the challenges for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business owners accessing capital and being able to grow. So they continue to have challenges accessing mainstream capital. But how we've been exploring internally how we break down some of the barriers, how we source the capital, and how we accelerate that flow of funds to really achieve some of the potential that's sitting latent at the moment.
And you spoke about National Reconciliation Week, and obviously, RAP reports or within a larger organisation. How can small businesses really be a part of National Reconciliation Week and taking action, even in a small scale?
Yeah, I think even in a small scale, think about who you are spending your money with, and have a look at maybe who you spent money with in the last 6 months, and whether or not there's an opportunity there that you could bring on board an Aboriginal supplier to supplement your supply chain. Are there goods that you could buy? Is there a local Aboriginal owned business that you maybe have a potential to do a collaboration with or a joint venture with? I think it's just that to get to reconciliation, we have to think outside the square, and we have to do things a little bit different, because if we don't do things differently and keep on going the same way we've been going, nothing changes. So it's about what's that one small incremental change that each business can make, and that would have a huge impact.
And so over the last couple of months, we've really been interviewing women who choose to challenge, and that's been in alignment to International Women's Day back in March. How do you choose to challenge in your role, Kate?
I choose to challenge, I think, by stepping outside of my comfort zone on an almost daily basis. So I choose to challenge racism, and I call it out. I choose to challenge the assumption that as a white woman, I don't have an ability to understand and bring value into the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander business space. And I choose to challenge accepting mediocrity, and I push our team, but I also support our team to be the very best that they can be.
When you're calling out something like racism in an environment like PwC, as an example, or in a corporate environment, how do you do that in a way that, God, what are my words here? Do it in a way, in an eloquent way that still comes across in a meaningful way?
Yeah, so I think I can do it in a way that, as you say, Catherine, is eloquent but also professional. And as you say, it also has to be meaningful. So my approach is always to call it out in the moment. So and not to be confrontational about it, but to just sort of say, hey, I don't think that's the right thing to say, or that's not the right thing to say. The way you would say it is this, or actually that's just not right. And I have said that's just not right. We don't speak like that. It's not acceptable. This is something that we would say, or, that's not the right. Sorry, I'm now not being eloquent answering your question. But I think the principles around it are that you need to talk about it at the time, or as soon as the moment as you can reasonably do that, because in effect it's about giving feedback. So you do it in a timely way. You do it in a way that's actionable. So you don't want to. You want to make sure that next time the person that you're talking to has got different words or a different way of approaching it, so that you're constructive with your feedback, and you do it in a way that doesn't embarrass them. So when I said that you do it in a timely way, obviously you don't do it in front of 50 other people if that's going to be completely embarrassing. You can step in and make a constructive comment that diffuses the situation, and then you have the conversation offline afterwards. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Kate, for sharing your world and all of your insights around PwC's Indigenous consulting with TradeSquare.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For more information on TradeSquare, head to www.tradesquare.com.au and support Australian business economic recovery and growth with a collaborative approach to the future of business.